you could argue that the conceptual part is already solved, right? If you think about conceptual, you can just draw on a piece of paper something which is not accurate at all, no perspective lines, nothing, and you will get amazing render just by prompting and conveying an idea clearly. And even when I'm saying that, conveying an idea clearly, you don't need to do that anymore because today prompt engineering is not such a big thing. You can actually go to the LLM and tell them, hey, this is what I want. Please help me rephrase my prompt, refine my prompt. It will refine your prompt much better than you. You can take the prompt, go to the Comfy UI or, all these tools, conceptual, rendering tools, and you will get an amazing nano banana based rendering. And you can iterate, which is also a new thing. It was not existed take 6 months ago. You could not iterate on the renderings, right? Now you can iterate on the renderings and it looks amazing. So conceptual design, I would say already solved. Well, the leap was there. It happened there.
In 2008, my guest today was still grinding through architecture school renderings by hand, the kind that took just days to get one image out. Today, he believes a small team with AI can build software powerful enough to challenge the tools that have dominated the construction industry for decades. After building and selling construction technology companies to Autodesk and leading large R&D companies in Israel, he came back to startups with a different thesis. The future of BIM isn't another Revit killer. It's an intelligence layer connecting everything architects already use. This is Eitan Sarfati, co-founder and CEO of Swapp. Let's get into it. Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening to another episode of Buildings 2.0, a podcast that highlights the voices shaping our built environment. I'm your host, Jose Cruz. Today, I'm sitting down with a really special guest, Eitan Sarfati. He's a CEO and co-founder of Swapp. He's a trained architect who's built and sold construction technology companies at Autodesk, ran a big team over in Israel doing R&D, and decided to come back to startup and build Swapp the last 7 years.
Yes.
Yeah. What a time. So maybe talking to you just a few days after one of the largest kind of venture capital funds and A16Z writes an article about every building you've ever been in was designed by software built in 1997. So all of a sudden, what you've been spending the last 7+, probably longer than a decade actually, building is all of a sudden in the spotlight. Why is everyone talking about the Revit killer? And you just posted that actually that's the wrong framing.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, what I saw, the Andreessen Horowitz post was actually hit everyone where it hurts because everybody's talking about Revit and 1997 software. I immediately commented on this. It's like saying that to say that the entire construction industry is built based on a 1997 software is like saying that the entire financial industry is based on Excel. And by the way, Excel was made in the 90s. So what does it say about the financial industry?
Right.
So I think that there's a lot of noise in the industry, and of course there are many tools today, not just tools that were built in the 90s. And the problem today, I would say, is the connection between the tools rather than one specific tool that everybody's looking at. Yes, of course, Revit is in the middle, and ArchiCAD. If you look at Europe, I think Europe is dominated by ArchiCAD. So I think everybody's looking at this, but this is just part of the workflow, and the workflow is going all the way to pre-construction, not just planning, design and planning, but all the way to pre-construction, construction, the job site, the delivery of items to the job site, the construction itself, the facility management of the building after it's built. So there are so many workflows and so many parts along the building lifecycle. So I think that there's that was a little bit superficial, I think, just to look at a software of from the 90s. But I see where it's coming from because the rise of a lot of software companies, they're trying to do either a Revit killer or the next BIM tool or the modern BIM tool based on data, modernization of data, democratization of data. These are all good things. These are positive things. It's someone who used Revit from the get-go, and I even used AutoCAD back in the days. I understand why people are doing it, and today more than ever, it can be done. So I believe that companies today can actually build BIM tools really, really quickly. If you asked me 3 years ago, Jose, I would probably tell you it will take 10 years to build another BIM tool. If you asked me 2 years ago, I would probably tell you it will take 5 years to build. But if you ask me today, I can tell that, this can be, I wouldn't say like a few months, but could be like in less than a year, I think a company can build a really strong BIM tool. So I think that the technology is there, and this is a positive thing to
Yeah.
the industry, that everybody's working on workflows and BIM tools, and let's see where it goes. I'm excited. For me, this is a dream come true. You can imagine.
Yeah. I have a lot of thoughts on this because I think when it comes to the topic of BIM, we could be talking to a different audience. Of course, there's the BIM geeks like you and I that are deep into file formats, delivery, integration, design authoring versus the data it's structured and all of that, that's evolving conversations around building unique geometry kernels and Revit killers. And we'll get to that for a moment. But for those listening that are like, I keep hearing about this BIM. I'm an owner operator. I own a building. My real estate team has CADs. Why does BIM matter? Just to zoom out, why should I? It sounds more expensive. If I am an owner operator of a building, why should I be paying attention to what's happening with BIM versus, say, where my team is at today, which is primarily CAD-based workflow?
Yeah, I guess, if we want to kind of explain, the premise of BIM and, the next BIM to owners, or to all the customers that are not BIM geeks, I would probably say that it's just another layer of information to CAD, if you think about it. You can build a CAD system fully 2D with all the information, but it will just be kind of, it will lack the 3D information, and then you will probably build something similar to any BIM tool out there. So BIM is building information modeling. The information part is very, very important. The reason that it's important, I would say from the owner perspective, that it kind of prevent designers or planners to draw lines without meanings. Which, if I can remember when I started to draw in CAD, it's very flexible. You can be very creative, but there are no guardrails. So you can actually draw anything. I can draw a rectangle on top of the roof and call it an AC component, but it will be half the size of AC component, and it will not connect to any electrical component, and I can just draw it. So
Yeah.
the owner should be worried that once the drawings go to the job site and someone is looking at this rectangle that I just drew, it doesn't mean anything, right? So it will just cause more delays. So I think the premise of BIM was to avoid delays, get more information, get the planners to put the right elements, and not just draw something from the top of their head.
To pull on this thread for a moment, as an owner, I hear a lot about data and metadata. I hear a lot of acronyms. We talk about LOD and LOA and all of this stuff. What the heck does that mean for me? So I hear this BIM model has data in it. As an owner, what does that mean?
So the data, if you're an owner, it could be a real estate developer. It can be the one that, uh, even the local district is an owner, if you think about it. And the whole idea about data is that you can learn from the past. If you think about it, if there was something happening in the past that you can learn from, someone need to store it somewhere. If someone store it somewhere, you want during the planning phase that someone will access these, specific elements that are stored in order to learn from. AI brought to the table is a way that is much quicker and much faster to retrieve the information, right? This is actually, I think, what everybody's talking about is that you don't need to go through hundreds and hundreds of pages on your own and retrieve the right information. You can actually use LLM, you can use models, and it's all like task driven, retrieving, right? It's very, very powerful. So I think that even owners without any connection to the drawings and to the BIM, when they're thinking about their buildings, let's say that they're also operating their building, they would love to know what data is there for specific errors or or defects in the building. They would love to know that. They would love to avoid it before it happens. So I think
Yeah.
this is the world of data.
Help me understand the landscape of BIM itself, right? So you have kind of BIM as a big umbrella. I'm just to role play a little bit here. I'm hearing that BIM could be BIM coordination. Then I'm hearing Revit for design. I'm hearing kind of layers of data. Help me navigate the various different maybe value chains of how do I navigate this as an owner who perhaps has a real estate team?
Mm-hmm.
We're in CAD. We've been hearing about BIM. Maybe someone on my team has been telling about it, but like I'm trying to navigate what this all means.
Oh man, where do I start, right? I would probably say that, if you're an owner and you don't know a lot about BIM, just start small. Don't think about all the aspects because there are many aspects. For BIM geeks like ourselves, we love to think about multiple elements in BIM, like the MEP, the structural, what happens later downstream, how does it affect the planning. We can think about many, many things that can populate the information in the beam. But for owner, I would probably say that it just, it's about coordination between different professionals. I mean, the owner is thinking about the building and he's thinking about, okay, there's an HVAC system here, structural system needs to work, plumbing, electrical, all needs to work together. When you're in a building, it's almost like obvious. Everything is working together. Right? But when you plan, if there are something that is not coordinated, it can cost the owner a lot. So this is where owners will embrace BIM when they start feeling it in their pocket, where something is not connected to another system, to another profession, planning their building their building. So I would say
Right,
that this
right,
is where
right.
it hurts.
Tell me a little bit more about your perspective. So you did on the subject of Revit killer, and we'll kind of expand from there. But you did mention that that's the wrong framing, right? What does that mean? And perhaps in your perspective, building Swap, where does
Mhm.
Swap fit in within the ecosystem of these
Yeah.
tools?
Yeah. So don't get me wrong. I love that people building, I would call it, Revit killer is like too harsh for me to say, but alternatives, right? And people should choose what tool to use and they shouldn't be tangled into one specific tool. I believe it. And I think that this is super positive to see that what we took a decision when we started Swap that there will be others that develop BIM tools. And what's really interesting for us is the intelligence layer on top of the BIM tools. This is what's really interesting because if you think about BIM, there is the 3D. Well, there are many types of, type of companies that build 3D. They all have their characteristics, but eventually it's a 3D model, right? Walls are walls, windows are windows, windows are hosted inside walls, hopefully. And there's another layer that you want to have access to all of the fragmented data without opening the file, getting access to the right data, which I understand that not all the incumbents allow today, but I think they can. I think that they can work on their architecture and actually allow it. I think Autodesk is doing the right move towards it. I believe that Graphisoft is doing the right move towards it. I think that they are doing the right things. Maybe it takes them longer than the industry wanted to happen, but it's actually happening. So once you have that, once you have the 3D, you have, let's call it democratization of data, that you can pull data out of this BIM tool. Then you can ask yourself, why build yet another BIM tool, right? Why the world is missing a new BIM tool? So if people can do it better, and there's a lot of companies doing it on the browser, right? So you could argue, okay, does it mean that cloud-based application should be always on the browser? I don't know. This is a question. Maybe you can run a cloud-based application. It should be it's not on the browser. Even I use Cloud today. I use Cloud Desktop. I use Cloud. They interact. So maybe there should be like two types of BIM tool, like connecting between themselves, one in the browser, one on desktop. So I think there are many ways to look at it. And I think that people tend to go with fun like paradigm. Hey, this should be like the next BIM tool, or did it wrong? The incumbents got it all wrong. I don't look at it this way. I'm looking at the industry. I'm looking about what the customers really use, what they want. It will take time for customers to adopt new tools, to get rid of what they already built for years. I mean, think about the migration of data from, let's say that, the next Revit killer will be like out of the door, will be there like next month. What about all the data? What about all the expertise? How do you migrate? How do you move everything? How do you take your entire organization to a new tool? It will take time. And my approach is different. I'm thinking about the variety of tools, which is great. And I want to be an intelligence layer on top of them. I want to make life easier for the people who already use BIM tools. So, for example, we have Swapp AI for Revit, and we have Swapp AI for ArchiCAD, and we'll have Swapp AI for many other BIM tools, and also for open source BIM tools. So, and you can enjoy AI and modern advanced automation without the precondition of killing Revit.
Yeah.
So this is why I think this is why I don't like the framing of Revit killer. I think that there are room for everyone. And if you build an agnostic intelligence layer on top of it, you can actually make life easier, make people much more productive. And this is what we want. We want people to use our tool.
I have a thesis, and I want you to tell me why I might be wrong or right here. I'm seeing a shift in conversation from tools to services, meaning one conversation is about building tooling for other folks to use to then ultimately arrive at an outcome. I'm also seeing another side that I think is quickly emerging, where there's a conversation, particularly with AI, about just, hey, it's actually not about the tool itself. It's just, we'll just do it. We'll just do the work for you. We're seeing this, of course, in some of the low hanging fruit with like AI generated designs, where it's less about a rendering tool and more about prompting a design, and it's just happening. And I'm seeing these two move very, very quickly in parallel. I look at industries like or rather, I look at what's happening with Figma, and then what's Claude and Lovable and Cursor and all these things. And I have to imagine, if I'm Figma, I'm having like an existential moment. I've built an incredible browser-based multiplayer tool that was the darling for the last few years. And yet here is a drastically different paradigm that designers are essentially saying, actually, I don't need to start from a blank slate. Like the thought of drawing a rectangle and just starting over and over again is crazy to me. Here I am, I can prompt fundamentally using language or other modals to just get something done. My hunch, of course, our background's coming from architecture. There's a part of me where it's like, of course, you're going to always need the architect to kind of drive. But then another part of me is like, well, if I were honest, if I were to abstract the first principle criteria and decisions that I have to make, and there are probably hundreds, thousands of things that I need to consider when doing a layout, doing a spatial model, considering material, etc. It's a lot, but it's not infinite. And so I think, and again, you tell me why I'm wrong here. I think there is going to be almost like a leapfrog moment where we start to talk less about which tool is better, this one or that one or this one, and actually just a leapfrog moment where we start to just design buildings in fundamentally different ways, where, going back to your point, where you draw a line, another one, another one, another one, you create a block. I just think that's going to go away. What am I maybe not considering here?
Oh, it could be. It could be. I mean, if you think about it's good that you gave an analogy. I mean, look at Figma, look at what happened with the SaaS industry altogether. I mean, there's a reason why stocks really almost crashed, right? I mean, 70%, 60% of SaaS companies they have good revenues. But if you think about it, there's a reason why it happened, because, like Claude is releasing amazing automation like every other week, right? Like not every other week, every week.
Literally, yeah.
Literally. And then, and you can think about, why, there was all kind of stories that people are building apps and they don't have even any software developing skills, and they're building apps that can actually compete with, SaaS companies that exist for the last few years, right? So there's a reason for that, and there's a reason why you are thinking like that, because you can see what happens in other industries, and you can think about Figma. Figma was, they were always almost acquired by Adobe, I think, for 20 billion, and now people are talking about Figma. Do you really need Figma, right?
I
I mean,
know.
you, I mean,
That's
you, I mean,
and that happened in a span of what? Just what, 2, 3 years? Like,
yeah,
that's
and
how quick they evolved.
I mean, you had Paul here, which is a dear friend, and they, they named themselves the Figma of architecture or something like that.
Yeah.
But they shouldn't use it anymore because Figma 4 is not really a good thing to use anymore. Because um, what if Claude create the next Figma? You know, for anyone to develop. So I think that there is a good reason, and I think that the way you're thinking about it is right. Probably there will be a shift. I don't know if it's a leap as you described, but there will be a shift, and we'll need to see how these workflows of planning a building from design, from conceptual. You could argue that the conceptual part is already solved, right? I remember I used to work on 3D Max, and I was an expert in 3D Max. I'm telling you, I knew all
You know all the settings, all the
everything,
shadow
everything,
settings, right?
everything, and I
Everything.
could I could create amazing models and amazing renderings even before GI, global illumination. I could create the best presets of lighting. Then came GI, and you don't need to create these presets. You can actually get them out of the box. But then what happened in conceptual? If you think about conceptual, you can just draw on a piece of paper something which is not accurate at all. No perspective lines, nothing. And you will get amazing render just by prompting and conveying an idea clearly. And even when I'm saying that, conveying an idea clearly, you don't need to do that anymore, because today prompt engineering is not such a big thing. You can actually go to the LLM and tell them, hey, this is what I want. Please help me rephrase my prompt, refine my prompt. It will refine your prompt much better than you. You can take the prompt, go to the Comfy UI, or all these tools, conceptual
Right.
rendering tools, and you will get an amazing nano banana based rendering. And you can iterate, which is also a new thing. It was not existed like take 6 months ago. You could not iterate on the renderings. Right now, you can iterate on the renderings, and it looks amazing. So, conceptual design, I would say, already solved, or the leap was there. It happened there. Now you go into schematic design, design development, construction documents, construction administration, pre-construction. You go all the way downstream until the actual during the building life cycle. And you could say, yes, maybe there are more leaps. Maybe there are more, let's call it, the wisdom of the machine that will generate automations for you, and you don't need to know a lot in order to create these things. So I
Yeah.
don't know what will happen, but I can see that it's moving fast.
I can't help but to, from my own perspective, while I'm less up to date on the rendering side and the kind of generative imaging, but I mean, what you're saying is incredible. I mean, I remember, I assume like you spend long nights in architectural studio just building one render, and I was happy if my computer made it, and then post processing on Photoshop, spending on like 2 or 3 days just to get one view.
Yeah.
I remember those days. Where my team and my company's at now is I'm kind of one step below that. So we receive 3D scans of existing buildings.
Hmm.
And what's been exciting in the last now, actually just a few days ago, 8 years, is that scan to BIM is nothing new.
Mhm.
But as a result of standardizing and accelerating, and then ultimately now we're working on automating the process, I can very easily see how the trends are going, so that as laser scanning gets more affordable, as the cost of modeling itself, which is our core service and now technology, is started here, and we're working to commoditize our own service, there's a world where the cost of digitizing accurately any building of any size, of any type, anywhere in the world
Hmm.
trends to near zero or
Hmm.
very affordable. Today, it costs thousands of dollars to scan a building, 3D model a building. It takes weeks, etc. But the reason I'm saying this is because while I can't speak to greenfield because there's so many other variables, brownfield existing buildings, I can see a world where you can scan a building relatively affordably, convert that building to precise as-built documentation that includes architectural, furniture, and MEP systems.
Hmm.
Now, one layer beyond that, of course, is then what do you do with that as-built information, that which gets into kind of the generative layout, and I'm starting to see, some cool stuff being built there. But you can start to see how when you connect all of the historic, what has been historically the job of the architect to connect, you start to see how these things are, while they're happening in kind of like these little silos, you can start to see how these things are coming together.
Yeah.
And you can, I don't know if it's 2 years from now. I mean, you alluded to, you joked about how, maybe 10 years ago you thought, or whatever, 2 years ago, it'd take 10 years to build another, and it's getting faster.
Hmm.
It seems like we could build any software. So I guess maybe the question that I wanted to ask you is that in a time when software is now easier to build than ever, what does it mean to build a lasting company? If I'm a startup founder, if I'm starting, especially now when everyone is starting their own tool on a Saturday and they're vibe coding something, how do I think about building something lasting?
Yeah, become a plumber, right? I think it's I think the NVIDIA CEO said it, the world will need a lot
More
of plumbers and electricians
electricians, yeah,
going back to working with your hands, right?
yeah, yeah.
Until the robots coming, like
And
you're
so
just
yeah,
pushing,
yeah,
pushing it forward. So
yeah, yeah.
of course, I'm not that pessimist. I think that it's related to questions that I'm getting asked by customers all the time. What will be the future of architecture? What will be the future of, our senior architects, our junior architects? Like everybody's talking about AI is replacing junior architects. So what will happen? How can they learn? Um, and then the senior architect is saying, yeah, now it's them, but tomorrow it's us, right? So I don't like to talk about replacing people. I think it's not the right phrasing because you can always be very pessimistic and say, we're all doomed and, it will replace all of us. But I don't think so. I think that, yes, all the professions that we know today will change. Whatever you do today, Jose, will change in 3 months, in 6 months, in 1 year. You will not do the same thing, and you need to evolve and you need to adjust. So if you want my 2 cents for, um, you know, not everlasting, but enough to, to sustain a business, is just to adjust, to be always on the lookout of what's happening, adopt new technologies, and, and just adjust, adjust in time. Yeah. I hope that helps.
I would keep you here forever, but I've got you here on a Friday, and I know it's much later for you. But I end these conversations realizing that we could have double clicked into any single one of these subjects and spent a whole hour on any of this. And obviously, the implications of AI, unpacking BIM, unpacking
Mm.
data, the missing gaps. For those listening, or maybe for a young Eitan, knowing what you know now, having the benefit of hindsight, having both seeing on the front lines what's happening, having also the benefit of hindsight, last 10, 15, 20 years, what would you tell a young Eitan coming out of architecture school, or just college in general, getting into the field of design?
First of all, that it's the best time to, to be an architect, or let's call it any industry which is not in the software development. You always thought, oh, I'm not in high tech or not in software development. I'm going to be poor or to not make a lot of money and things like that. But today, you should be very pumped and energized by what's happening. The sky's the limit for you. You can do whatever you want. You can start your own company. You can develop software. You can write code without knowing how to write a single line of code. You can be rich by selling this software. You can do whatever you want. You can affect the entire industry. You have, we used to think about when the iPhone came out, we said, okay, you have the entire information world knowledge in the palm of your hand, right? We say that, but it wasn't really true because you couldn't access this information. Yes, it was in the palm of your head, but you need to go through Google, and you have to search for it, and you need to read about it, and there you go. It's over a year, and you didn't cover, 1% of what you wanted to cover. But now it's different. You have actually access to a lot of information, and you have access to artificial intelligence that can do something, on your behalf with this technology. And this is amazing. And you don't need to go and study how to write code. You just need to be a super curious person, which architects are, they have it. This is another LinkedIn post that I recommend you to read, is how I'm very bullish about architects. I wrote this, and I said, like, architects, they're not like the best product managers. They can be the best builders, like, of software, because they're super creative. They studied 5 years of how to be very, very creative to solve problems. And now they can use these skills to actually think about complex systems without being the ones that actually need to know the syntax, whether to put, to write it in Python or C# or C++. It doesn't matter.
Right.
They just need
Right.
to be who they are, remain curious, and just look for solutions and develop themselves. So it's an amazing time for our folks.
I believe you raised some capital for the business. And venture capital is a very specific kind of financing strategy that's maybe a traditional architecture firm or engineering firm, kind of very different approach there. For an emerging startup founder in AEC, what should I know before going down this route?
Well, that there's a playbook. There was a VC that I respect that told me, an investor, invest like hundreds of millions of dollars in companies, and he told me, "Look, we are a very superficial creatures. We are we are very much, we follow a playbook, and all you have to do as a founder, you just follow our playbook, because it's really hard to
Yeah.
change." So I think that, and it doesn't mean that they're not sophisticated, just means that they're very analytical. And when you're very analytical, you're following a playbook. You need to know in advance, you need to be predictable about what you're investing in. So, all of the acronyms that we all know, like ARR, gross margin, and
LT.
and NDR, LTV CAC.
Yeah.
These are all basic metrics that you need to follow. And if you don't follow them, don't expect to get investment. So if some investor, I had a funny conversation with an investor that told me, "Oh, we don't care about these things. We want to hear your story." And, of course, it's not true. I mean, you cannot be an investor. You cannot run a VC if you don't follow a playbook. You probably report to your LPs in a certain manner that will not change. So it's just a matter of learning the playbook. So
Yeah.
this is my only advice: not to get offended by it, not to think that they have something against you personally. They don't. If you bring the right numbers and the right metrics, they're just going to invest, and they're going to compete between themselves. That's the
Yeah. Yeah. I think those were some wise words. One of my own investors, Eric Paley, who I see to be as a legend, told me a bit of advice that to this day I think was helpful not only for me but for folks that might be listening. And he after we closed a $3 million seed round, the team and his team invested in us, and he said, "Jose, just remember, money, capital doesn't bring any new insight, which is good or bad. Meaning, if you are hoping to use this money to somehow figure something else out, you're probably in trouble. And that's a very fast way to burn the money. And so don't expect to kind of outsource something that you might not know or haven't
Mhm.
solved to
Mhm.
money. Whether you have $1 in the bank or $10 million in the bank, you still have to convince a customer to give you $1. So you might as well focus on figuring that out first.
Smart guy.
Yeah, so I thought that was especially in a time when it feels like most companies almost default, especially startup in technology and AUC, almost like default that the only financing strategy is raising money. I seem to get a lot of folks, I'm sure you do as well, where emerging founders will come and almost assume that the only way that the measure of success is if a VC gives them a check. And so, yeah.
Not at all. Not at all.
Yeah, I think my prediction, I think, is that VC in general might fall out of fashion. Just yesterday, I think I read something where a guy, like 2 employees, just did a telehealth company and somehow did about a billion in revenue in 18 months. I know we were predicting the kind of one person $1 billion company, but I guess we're starting to see it. And so totally self funded. My prediction is that we'll probably start kind of getting back to a time where as we, it's easier to build, we might just find that there's, more sustainable ways to fund it
Yeah,
than,
yeah.
than just VC.
Yeah, absolutely. Because now the two-person startup or one is too little. I mean, one you need to work like all day and all night, right? But two or three people. If you think about it, it's not really three people because you have like cloud code, and you have your AI agents that they create code for you. So multiply your work. So I think that this is what's happening in the industry. You don't need too many people to build a good software today.
Eitan, with that, there's a million and one topics we got to do. We got to do part two. But I think this is
Absolutely.
an incredible primer. I think in understanding how you think of the world, I absolutely love how you described the evolution of the architect and seeing that kind of optimism and the things that we've learned. While maybe the tooling might change, being more optimistic than ever. I think in the way that we're educated, I think is going to probably play out as useful here.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm super optimistic.
Yeah,
Hope
yeah.
that you are too.
I am. I really am. And actually, I love that framing because it's less. I think that for me, what I've struggled with is like the current day to day workflows. I can see a path how like the jobs to be done
Mhm.
by a junior architect, intermediate architect at a firm will evolve. The mindset and structuring and education of what an architect is in terms of the generalist that needs to connect all these systems and complex is going to be actually more needed than ever.
True.
And that was
True.
a framing that I think maybe I needed to hear myself. So really
All
appreciate
right.
your time.
Sure thing, Jose. Was my pleasure.